schedule. What did you want to ask about?
About the gender wage gap. We've discussed that a few times, and all the factors that lead to it.
Yeah, well, that's another topic about which our culture is too. I guess part of it's fear, part of it's naivety, some of it's ideological possession, but some of it is just complexity. You know, I mean, we're in the aftermath of the invention of the birth control pill, and we don't want to underestimate the impact of that. I mean, one of the impacts of that, by the way, as far as is known, is that women on the birth control pill don't like masculine men as much as women off the birth control pill. That's pretty damn interesting. So look, here's one of the examples of that. So the pill, to some degree, mimics the state of pregnancy. Now, if you take women across the ovulatory cycle and you show them pictures of men, say the same man, but you vary his jaw width, which you can do obviously with Photoshop or something like that, the women closer to ovulation like the guy with the squarer jaw, the wider jaw, and that's a marker for testosterone. And as she moves away from ovulation, she likes the narrow-jawed guy better, and that, you know, the higher testosterone guys are more assertive and more dominant. So the fact that the pill has shifted women towards preference for less masculine men is something that has unknown political consequences.
You're starting to sound just a teensy-weensy bit like Alex Jones, because he told me the fluoride would not only turn frogs gay, but also my son.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm a little on the fence on that one.
It's not just good for your teeth, like all those dentists want you to believe.
Right.
You know?
Don't believe big dentistry.
Don't believe big dentistry, so Joe. It's a complete scam.
That's fascinating. So my friend Woody here has an interesting preference for the women that he finds attractive, and I'd love for you to sort of give us your shake on this. So we all went on a rafting trip once, and there was a very muscular guide on the trip, a female, and she had a hairy belly, like she had what we call a happy trail, where, you know, hair extends from below her bikini line all the way up and around her belly button. It's visibly
up to
there.
The belly button, not around it.
Yeah, she's got that square jaw that you're referring to, and she's muscular. She's doing a job that only men are doing besides herself, and she's not asking for any help. There's this part where the guide has to lift a 8-person raft over their head and walk with it, and she had learned a technique to do it, like a fireman's carry, and it was just whoa, and she had it. And Woody was smitten, and everybody else was thinking like, that's not my cup of tea. That's not what I find. This is a fine-looking young lady, but that doesn't turn me on. That's not
pretty.
If we were out in the wilderness and this was the last group of human beings, I'd be like, well, maybe there's some cave bitches over there or something. Like maybe there's some like Amazonian women who are like 6 feet tall and blonde and hairless. Like, let's go look for them. But Woody's like, nah, me and Muglug here, we're together now.
So I saw this Jimmy Kimmel episode, and he and Sarah Silverman talking, and Sarah Silverman was always self-conscious about the amount of body hair that she has. You know, she would grow a mustache, for example, if she didn't take care of it, and she had hairy arms. And Jimmy Kimmel, who used to date her, said, I always liked your hairiness, because that means you have high testosterone, and that means you like sex. And it was like, aha, I've thought that for years before I heard Jimmy Kimmel say it. I had arrived at that same conclusion, that, you know, a high T woman is a woman who's down. And I guess Kyle wants you to call me gay or something.
Sounds like a post hoc rationalization to me. So,
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no accounting for taste, and I'm certainly not going to step in the middle of this discussion. I can tell you that.
I'm not that sensitive.
So
what it's worth.
the wage gap issue. That's one of these other. Sorry, guys.
Oh, come on.
I mean, it was a post hoc rationalization already.
No,
I mean,
it's not just her. Like, we'll look at women online and stuff. Sometimes we objectify them in a terrible way. And I see someone with like a square jaw and think like she's hot. Like that's a good looking girl. And everyone else is like, no.
Yeah, it's not just this Woody one person thing. It's that, you know, when we do look at women on the show or girls or whatever, consistently Kyle and I have very similar taste, very small, more petite, feminine women, softer. And Woody usually likes kind of the cage fighter look.
Yeah, well, maybe
to
he's
his
up
women.
for a challenge, man. I'll call it a testament to his courage. How about that? Put you two down
Very
instead.
kind way to say it.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll go back to the
We
wage
could go
gap.
to the wage gap if you're not having fun with that.
Well, I mean, there's the standard statistic that's always bandied about is it's a univariate statistic. It acts as if there's only one reason why there's differences between the earnings of men and women. It collapses them completely across age, which is absolutely unfair. And it fails to take into account the fact that there are multiple contributing factors. One of the hallmarks of ideological thinking is that everything is caused by one thing. In this case, the patriarchy and discrimination and oppression. Now, it's reasonable to posit that part of the reason that some women make less money than some men is because of holdover of discrimination, let's say. And I suspect that probably does play a role, although an increasingly small role. But there's all sorts of other factors. So, for example, we know that agreeable people make less money than disagreeable people in the same jobs. And part of the reason for that is that a disagreeable person will say, hey, if you don't give me more money, I'm going to leave. And they mean it. And they'll say it without being afraid of the conflict. Or it isn't being afraid of the conflict because it isn't fear. But agreeable people don't like conflict. It's like, well, lots of times bargaining for money, that's a conflictual enterprise, man, because people just don't leave money lying around. Everybody, if it's just lying there, someone's going to pick it up. And so you actually have to bargain and push to, especially in the world today, in order to continue to move your salary up the hierarchy as you move up the socioeconomic ladder. It's an active game. Men are also more driven by socioeconomic status than women are, and part of the reason for that is that women admire men who are of higher socioeconomic status, and the reverse isn't true. So there's a big correlation between male socioeconomic status and male sexual success, and the correlation for women is negative. And that's a big deal. Well, you think, here's why. Like, look, I mean, I see this. I've worked with a lot of high-powered women as a consultant because I worked for this company for a while that took law partners in big law firms who were extremely high-performing and tried to make them better, because our pitch was, look, your high-performing people generate most of your revenue. We can probably increase their productivity by 10%. And we'll charge you a fraction of what that will bring you. And so it was quite fun because I got to work with, I've had a practice that's really spanned the range of intellectual ability. And I got a chance to work with a lot of really, really competent lawyers. And most of the ones I worked with were women. Well, the law firms all lose the women in their 30s, the big law firms. All the women quit. And the women know it, and so do all the law firms. So, and I know the reasons. They're pretty straightforward. So this is the typical story. So the typical female partner in a big law firm is well put together, very conscientious, very intelligent, and very dutiful. And so they're the sort of women who did extremely well in high school. Then they did really well in university. Then they aced their LSATs. Then they went to law school and did extremely well. Then they articled and did extremely well, and then they got their, it's not called an internship. I don't remember what the hell the lawyers call it, articling. And then, they make partner, and then they're 30. Okay, now they've hit the pinnacle of their profession. You can still move up because, there's no end to up in a job like law. But what happens is that they wake up at 30 and they think, what the hell am I doing? They're working with these guys who are hyper competitive. You have to work 60 to 80 hours a week. And I mean work too. It's not like, it's a competitive business, man. If you're not going to be working flat out, someone's going to come along and take you out. And it's not team play. It's very competitive because the men are all jockeying for position and they're jockeying with the women. And the men don't know what to do with competitive women because they can't flatten them like they might a compatriot, and they can't kowtow them to them. So they don't know what to do with them. And the women are also in their 30s immediately beset by all of the other issues of life. Like, do I get married? Do I have a partner? Do I have kids? How the hell am I going to do that and maintain this 60 to 80 hour a week work week? And all of them, virtually all of them, decide to quit. They take 9-to-5 jobs. They take a massive pay cut, and they go have a life. And the strange thing isn't that they do that, because the strange thing is that some men will get so obsessed with their business, their law business, say, that they'll happily work 60 to 80 hours a week, right? And that's a small percentage of men. And those are the hyper-productive men that occupy the top rungs of the Pareto distribution, the strange 1% distribution of creative production that also characterizes wealth. And so the issue isn't why there aren't women at the higher echelons of power. It's a stupid question, because most of the men aren't there either, right? The question is, what the hell is up with the people who do occupy those higher echelons of power? And that's fairly straightforward. They're generally very intelligent. They're generally either very creative or very conscientious. They're extremely energetic. They're very status driven. They're very physically healthy because they have high levels of energy. And they're insanely single-minded about their pursuit. And those are very rare people. Now, they're the people who rise to the top. Yeah, exactly. That's Trump.
Sound like anyone you know.
Is he grabbing her by the pussy?
Of course he's grabbing her, and she's not happy about it.
No, she's not.
That's my disc golf disc. I had it made. Yeah, I did a good job.
Had it made. Jesus Christ.
Of course I had it made. Hey, they don't make these. I had to request this.
I woke up in my 30s.
That's sad that you have that thing.
Everyone else gets a laugh out of it.
It's more sad that it's disc golf. Yeah.
I was like 36 maybe, and my listeners have heard this before. Kyle had a YouTube channel, or has a YouTube channel that was just exploding, right? It was going crazy, and I was sitting in these meetings working big hours, really. I used to be a senior software architect for Cisco, the networking company.
Yep.
And,
yeah, that's a competitive job.
So I'm there, and I'm in these meetings, just super focusing, because a lot of people speaking with accents, and it's soul sucking for me. And Kyle sends me a picture of his day, which is a pickup truck filled with watermelons. He's going to explode later on, and it was like, oh my God, I want to be Kyle when I grow up, and then I had to make that happen. So
yeah, well, not everybody is or should be cut out for absolutely obsessive attention to their career. And the guys who are like that, it often costs them in terms of their familial relationships, or they have someone at home who's backing them up, 100%, something like that. And then, these women, the other thing that was interesting about these women is they often have a hard time finding mates because, well, most of them are attractive, they're well put together physically, so they're intimidating because they're fairly beautiful. Then they're smart, then they're rich.
Tell me about their belly
Then
hair.
they're tough. Yeah, generally a marked absence of such things. So what happens too, as men advance up the socioeconomic hierarchies ladder, they get more attractive to women. But as women march up the ladder, they get more intimidating to men. And so besides, we also have the hypergamy phenomena, which is that women marry across and up dominance hierarchies, or hierarchies, let's say, not necessarily dominance hierarchies, and men mate across and down. And so one of the implications of that is for women is that as women become increasingly successful across multiple domains, it's harder and harder for them to find a mate because there just aren't any. Mm-hmm. And then it even gets worse because it's better to be a beautiful 25-year-old woman than to be a beautiful 30-year-old woman. And the reason for that is that if you're a beautiful 30-year-old woman, you have to compete with beautiful 25-year-old women. And the thing about beautiful 25-year-old women is they don't put as much pressure on men. Because if you're a 30-year-old man, okay, so fine, you meet a 30-year-old woman, and that's fine, except that she wants to have children now. Whereas if you are going out with a 25-year-old woman, it's like, 5 to 7 years. And men, they can wait. So and later, my sense is women should be married by the time they're 27. I'll just state that bluntly. It gets ugly afterwards. Now, that's a rule of thumb, but it's something I'd certainly, and have told my daughter, who is actually married. She's 20, how old is she? She's 25. But
she made it.
You made it. You made it just under the wire, man. But I'm not saying that because I think there's something wrong with women over 27. That's not the point. The point is that it's not that easy to find a partner, and you have to put your best foot forward in every possible way. And age actually happens to matter. And you can call it sexism if you want. I don't give a damn what you call it. But most 25-year-old guys won't go out with an 80-year-old woman. And you can call that ageism too if you want, and that's exactly what it is. But we don't want to be too stupid about such things.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense with the super successful women almost like pricing themselves out of the market, because if they're making $500,000 a year as an attorney and they meet a doctor who's making $480,000 as a surgeon or something, like, to most people they'd be like, oh hell yeah, like we're pretty close. But like, I'm kind of understanding you're saying there's almost like an intrinsic thing in women that they need someone higher up. They don't want someone on that same plane.
The thing about women, it's partly biological and partly just plain bloody rationality. Like, you place yourself into a position of dependence when you're pregnant and when you have an infant. So let's call that 3 years, okay? And then if you have 2 or 3 kids, it's like 7 years, let's say. Well, what's the logical thing to do if you place yourself in a state of dependency voluntarily?
Get a contract that assures your future.
Yeah, you find someone who's going to help you out, man.
Yeah.
So you're going to look for someone who's competent. And why would you look for someone less competent than you? You already have you. So these things are. I think it's a sign of the immaturity of our culture that we can't have these sorts of discussions. And I'm really not happy with the way that young women are educated, because most of what they're told are lies. Like, they're told, for example, that career is going to be the most important part of your life. It's like that's true for a very small fraction of people. So you have to have a pretty damn spectacular career before it's worth sacrificing the other values and pleasures of life for.
I saw you were talking about Frozen at one point, and how that movie had I've never seen the movie, but apparently you were saying it has a political agenda. Does that kind of play into what you're seeing with women not getting this talk as much?
Yes.
Like, are you noticing things in the zeitgeist?
Can you lay that out?
I don't fully know.
Well, it was explicitly not a Prince saves the princess movie, and fair enough in a very kind of casual sense. But the thing is that the prince does rescue the princess. That's the archetypal story, and the prince that rescues the princess can be the woman's own masculine side. I mean, these stories can be read at individual psychological and sociological levels. But Frozen, in my estimation, was essentially a piece of propaganda, because it attempted to subvert the standard relationships between the genders. And I don't find creative products that have an ideological agenda credible, and I didn't find Frozen credible in the least, because it violates basic truths, and it does it casually. I thought there were other things wrong with the movie.
I thought the boyfriend guy with the moose, he kind of comes in and saves the day, right? The princess is lying there dying, and he gets her warm again, and then she's able to go save the day. And while it's not the prince drawing his sword and facing down the dragon for his love, it's not that standard archetype, but he's there in his own way.
Yeah, well, he's sort of the nice, supportive guy, and you know how well they do in
I see. You're right. He comes in when there's trouble with a blanket and go get him, girl. You got this.
Yeah.
And then he fucks off somewhere with his moose.
Like on that exact same token, I love your explanation, and I'd never been able to internally articulate it before, about the male feminist thing and the whole, like, just it gives you a creepy vibe. And the more I heard you talk about it, where you're saying, well, these people are just kind of weaker, subservient men that can't compete in a traditional male hierarchy, so they have to be kind of sneaky and try and go under the wire.
Let me tell you a funny story, man. People will hate me for this one. So it's about orangutans, and so now a fully developed male orangutan is the guy that has the big fat pads around his face, so he almost looks like a moon, eh? And he's a big, tough character, and the big males get so big they actually can't hang around in trees. They spend most of the time on the ground, whereas the typical orangutan is up in the trees. And so it used to be thought, so there's only one of these males around in any given territory, and these big males, and then there's other males that kind of look like the females. And it used to be thought that all of those more juvenile looking males were adolescents. But then they discovered that wasn't true, that what happened was is if there was a dominant and fully developed male in the territory, then all of the other males didn't mature fully, and they stayed in their juvenile form. Now the female orangutans come to the big moon-faced guy. So they come for mating purposes to him. The juveniles have to resort to rape. And if you can't understand that from a human perspective, then you're not bloody well thinking. So it's the same thing is that the successful males, and this is true genetically. So for example, you have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors. And you think, no, that can't be possible. It has to be 50-50, but it doesn't. So it's easy. Every male who reproduced had 2 children, but a bunch had 0. And every female who reproduced had 1. So every female had 1 child, and half the males had 2. That's basically the stats. So there's much more male reproductive failure than female reproductive failure. And that's part of this Pareto distribution issue where all the spoils go to the victor. So, but the orangutan story is just insanely comical as far as I'm concerned,
It is an interesting parallel. Do you think it's something that is thought about cognitively by people, like in the male feminists trying to sneak in under the radar? Or do you think it's almost just a strategy that they're going out and doing, trying to get laid, and they don't even fully think about it?
I think they use the be nice strategy. And I think they use it because they don't have a better one.
That's fascinating, but I would have to take that study one more step, right? Remove the male, remove the dominant male, and maybe through artificial means rise one of these juvenile males who look a bit like a female, one of these beta males, rise him up to the new alpha. However you do that, I don't know.
That is what happens in the
You put a handkerchief on him, maybe they'll all love him now, But what happens then? Does he start growing those fat pouches and getting a mane?
Yes. That's exactly what happens.
It's so fascinating.
It's mind-boggling, man.
That happens with pigs too. So pigs are like dogs. They're all part of the same species. So any pig can interbreed with any other pig, whether it's those micro silly pigs you see on Instagram or it's those big Russian boars with tusks. They can all interbreed. And what happens when you release one of those pink little pigs that we all have for bacon here in the United States, you release him out there in the wilds of Texas with the Russian boar and the hybridization that's happened there. It's its own species at this point. Within 6 months or something, maybe it's 6 weeks, he starts growing this long, black, bristly fur. He starts growing tusks, cutting teeth. Like he becomes what they are. So that's. I'd like to see that in humans now. I mean, we're just animals too. There's got to be an example of what. If I were in that survival situation, like if the world falls to apocalypse and there are 3 males in 30-mile radius and I'm one of them, do I finally get like a full beard? Like, is this gonna fill in?
Not even then.
No,
God damn it!
It's an open question. It's an open question how different you would be in a truly different situation. I mean, we do know, for example, that one of the reasons that people change when they go to new environments is because new environments switch on new genes in the brain. So it's not merely a matter of absorbing new information and encoding new memories and all of that. It's that you literally change physiologically when you subject yourself to new challenges. New genes turn on and code for new proteins. And we have no idea what the full extent of that is.